And then I'm going to hand over to Ernie to give you an update around technical. And then obviously the meeting will be open for questions. So anything that you'd like to raise, please feel free to do so. All right. We might make a start. Okay, so today for our agenda, we've got the following topics that we're going to cover. So I'm going to give you an update around MPAQ, what's been happening, what we're working on at the moment. We've also recently completed our benchmarking survey. So I'm going to give you an overview of some of the results that we've got. Kim's going to talk to you about wages and COVID-19 and the changes around superannuation. And then Ernie's going to talk to you around apprentice licensing, Certificate 3 in plumbing, Form 16s, and building certifiers. And I think maybe a few notifiable work items in there as well. So that kind of gives you an update on the format for the meeting today. We'll go to the next slide. All right, so I'm going to give you an update on the following items. So the first one is our Plumbing and Gas Industry Awards. You would probably be aware by now we have put out communication to let people know that unfortunately we've had to postpone our awards night, which was scheduled for this Friday. It's now been rescheduled for the 15th of October, which is a Friday night. It will be held at the Brisbane Convention and Exhibition Centre, the same venue that we have. So fingers crossed, we hope that we're going to be in a better position than we are at the moment. And the main reason we had to delay was obviously due to the 4 square metre rule, where we'd only be able to have half the number of people in the room. So, sorry, that's my daughter trying to come in and interrupt me while I'm doing the meeting. The next one that I just wanted to advise is around lead in plumbing. So you may have already heard of this before, but there's been some talk at the Australian Building Codes Board for probably since 2019 or maybe 2018 around looking at ways to reduce lead content in products that are drinking water products. And we were hoping to have an update. We were supposed to have a release out today. So I was hoping to be able to share some further information on what's happening, but unfortunately I'm not in a position to be able to share that until the public statement has been released from the Australian Building Codes Board. So as soon as that is released, we'll be able to communicate that message out to members. So I just wanted to give you an update around lead in plumbing. The next one is what we call MPAQ, which is the Plumbing Industry Climate Action Centre. So that's our training college at Beenleigh. So you'd probably be aware that couple of years ago, we were given some funding from the state government to build phase 1 of the building, which we did. And now we're building phase 2. We were fortunate to be given some additional funding from the state government. And they've given us some money to be able to build the Hydrogen Training Centre of Excellence. So the work is all in progress at the moment, and it's due for completion either sort of later this year and hoping to be able to start taking apprentices from February next year. So that's pretty exciting. There's lots of action happening down there. So there's lots of recladding that's happening within the buildings. We've got a lot of the structural steel has all been completed. We've got the pre-cast panels have now been completed. We've got some classrooms that have been completed. They've completed all the stormwater headworks, and they're doing the cladding on Pavilion 4 as well. So a lot of activities that's happening down in MPAQ, and we're hoping to officially open that either later this year or early next year and start taking apprentices. Our focus at the moment is to liaise with the local high schools to encourage more people to take on plumbing as an apprenticeship and give them the opportunity to come through and have a bit of an open day and look through the facilities. And also for us to be able to get out to the schools as well and talk face-to-face to all the students about, plumbing as a potential career path and, what the future opportunities would be after you complete your plumbing apprenticeship. For example, running your own business, becoming a plumbing inspector, a designer, a hydraulic consultant, being a teacher or a trainer. So we're very much focused on that at the moment. The next one was just a newsflash that came out from the Department of Public Works and Energy, just in relation to the postponing of the repeal of the head contractor licensing exemption. So we have put some information out about this, but I'll just run through it very briefly. So the department put it out to advise that the commencement of Section 125A of the Building Industry Fairness and Other Legislation Amendment Act, so that's the security of payment legislation, has been postponed, and that the QBCC Act 1991 provides that a person must not carry out building work unless they hold an appropriate contractor license. However, an exemption under Schedule 1 of the Act allows an unlicensed person to enter into building contracts and arrange for building work to occur, provided the work is not residential construction work or domestic building work and is carried out by an appropriately licensed contractor. So just wanted to give you an update on that. We have put some information out, and if anyone has any questions, please let us know. And then the last point that I just wanted to raise was around the feedback that we're receiving. So last week we held what we called our MPAQ major contractors, our MPAQ Corporate Associates Committee meeting. And that's a committee that's set up for suppliers and manufacturers to provide advice to us or provide information to us around issues that they're seeing out on the ground in the manufacturing and the suppliers world. So I'll just share some of the findings from that meeting. So some of the feedback that we received is that there are shortages out there in surveying equipment, which is impacting on different industries. There's also what we call a major chip shortage at the moment, and also shipping issues of products from overseas, which has resulted in, supply issues for them to be able to bring them in here. There is also an increase in air freight, which is adding significant costs to the products. And there's also no guarantee that they're actually going to get here on the time that they say that they're going to. We're obviously seeing steel shortages, shortages of PVC with resin, and they've also indicated that potentially that there's more to come in terms of the shortages. And obviously the lack of flights that are happening, the air freight is extremely expensive, as I mentioned, and not all the flights are guaranteed that they're going to be going ahead. So there are delays with freight coming over, whether that be by sea or by air. Some of the timeframes are pushing out from a 3-month timeframe to maybe a 6-month timeframe now as well. And the suppliers are indicating that this situation seems to be far worse than it was 6 to 12 months ago, when we were in the heat of things last year. And just with the increase in demand and in supply, they're not readily available. Not all products are readily available. So I just wanted to mention that as well. And maybe in the question and answer time, if anyone has any comments or if they're seeing that, to please let us know. All right, I'll move on to the next slide. And the next slide is just an update around the benchmarking survey. So every year we conduct what we call a survey with all members and non-members as well. And we basically want to be able to get industry feedback on some of the critical issues that you're seeing out there. We do it every year. So we do compare the reports year on year as well to see how it's increasing, decreasing. We've just kind of finalized this information on Friday, so we haven't done the comparisons to previous years yet, so we won't be able to share that data yet. However, we will put together a report and circulate that out so that everyone can see what's happening. So of the survey that we sent out, we had over 225 people respond. 62 of the survey responders were based in Southeast Queensland. 10% were from the Wide Bay region. And of the survey responders, 45% have 2 to 5 employees, 22% were sole operators, and 24% of the survey responders have been in business for over 11 years. So that just kind of gives you a summary of some of the stats from the beginning. And we'll go on to the next slide. So I mentioned this before about the material shortages. We also asked plumbers what's their average spend on materials and products. And the figure that we got back, the average spend per annum is $410,000. So that's kind of good data that we want to obviously obtain. 84% of the survey respondents indicated that quality is the most important decision-making factor when deciding what products that they're going to go to. So that was interesting. The next one was the relationship with the supplier and the manufacturer at 62%, followed by the client specification. And then price came in at 47% in terms of why people choose to buy from one over the other. So that just kind of gives you a snapshot over materials. And we'll go on to the next slide. So the next one we asked about charge out rates. So obviously this is a popular topic and we understand everyone's got different views. So charge out rates, 70% of the survey responders advise that they calculate their charge out rate as an hourly rate. 41% advise that they calculate it for differently depending on the type of job that it is. And 37% of survey respondents indicate that they do fixed pricing for jobs. So that was interesting to get that feedback specifically around charge out rates. And we'll go on to the next slide. So in terms of the charge out rate calculations, so 66% of the survey responders advised that the most important factor when calculating charge out rates is covering expenses. Then the next important was profit margin at 47%, 36% at wages, 26% at customer expectations, and competition or competitor pricing is the least important factor around charge out rate. So that was an interesting point as well in terms of what other plumbing businesses in the area are charging. And we'll go on to the next slide. This one might be a little bit harder to read, but basically we asked survey responders how much they're charging out their tradespeople and apprentices at. So you can see here, it also varies depending on if they're a sole trader. You've also got your admin and clerical staff in there as well. So we've got a tradesperson being charged out on average at $104. So you can see that on the third line. And then going down to your fourth year apprentice at $78 an hour. A team, as in an apprentice and a tradesperson, is $136 per hour. Admin down at $43 and other noted down at $52. So that's a bit of an interesting summary that we wanted to provide to you today, just around charge out rates and what people are charging out different levels, as opposed to just doing the one fee at one amount. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide. So we asked what are some of the key challenges from the survey results, and 50% indicated of the survey respondents that they were very concerned about the effect of unlicensed people performing plumbing work and how that would impact their business. 50%, that's pretty high. 24% indicated that they were very concerned about the effect of skill shortages on their business. So obviously that's another key issue that we're seeing out there at the moment around shortages for licensed tradespeople, and how do people find them, and how do they keep their staff as well. And then the least concern to businesses was in the next 12 months was in regards to the plumbing inspectors or their dealings with local government. So that was just some interesting points that we wanted to put down. We'll go to the next slide. The job management software. So we did ask survey respondents, did they actually use a job management system? Did they have one in place? And 32% said no, they do not use a job management software. So they might just continue using Excel spreadsheets, or they might have a Word document that they keep contact details for clients, etc. in. 18% of the survey respondents indicate that they use ServiceMate, and 12% of survey responders use Simpro Enterprise. So that was just an interesting fact that we thought we would share in regards to software. Okay, that wraps up me now in terms of the industry survey. As I mentioned, we will put together a comprehensive report and we will be able to circulate that out so everyone can have a bit of a look. That's just some of the key snapshot that I wanted to share with everybody today. All right, now I'm going to introduce Kim, our Senior HR Advisor. And Kim, you're going to give us an update around the national minimum wage increase, a little bit of an update around COVID-19, and then also the superannuation changes that have occurred. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks very much, Penny. Just wanted to let everyone know about the national minimum wage increase that was handed down in June this year. So the increase was effective from the first full pay period on or after the 1st of July. It's applicable to all awards covering our members here at MPAQ, except for the retail award. And it also includes apprentices. A lot of members forget that apprentices actually have 2 increases a year. So they move up to their next year level at some stage throughout the year, but they also have an increase when the national minimum wage is handed down. The wage sheets are available on the MPAQ website. If you will need to log in to access those wages. If you have any problems in logging in, can you please give the office a call and we'll look into that for you. So I'll just move on to the next slide. National Cabinet announced a mandatory vaccination for all aged care workers, and the first injection must be had by September this year. We are finding here in Queensland that some of the residential aged cares are drafting their own policies, and they're letting contractors know that by September, their staff members must have had their first injection for COVID. So MPAQ has been working with the Queensland COVID vaccine task force, and both Emma and myself have an email with the list of steps that you must take for your workers to be able to access their vaccine now. I know that we do have limited vaccines available at the moment, but your workers can be put on the priority list. Our HR advisor has drafted a guidelines document in relation to COVID-19, and we also have an example policy for those members that want to implement a policy within their workplace. I'll just move on to the next one. So, and just a quick reminder that superannuation has increased to 10% from the 1st of July this year. So that is based on the ordinary time earnings for your employees. Please don't include overtime in that when you're calculating your super. The super rate is scheduled to progressively increase by 0.5% each year from the 1st of July through to the 1st of July 2025 when it reaches 12%. And again, if you have any questions in relation to your employees, their wages, their superannuation, please give either Emma or myself a call at MPAQ. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, Kim. Thanks very much for the update on that. Okay, now I'll hand over to Ernie. Ernie, you're online. Ernie, you're going to start off by talking a little bit around apprentice licensing. Thank you.
Okay. Evening, everyone. We had an issue recently where a plumbing company's apprentice, their 4th-year apprentice, turned up for work one morning and notified his employer that he was no longer an apprentice, that he held a provisional license. We looked into this a little bit, and to cut a long story short, what had happened was the license was issued on the Certificate 3 alone. So instead of requiring sign off by both the RTO and the employer, the license was issued based on the RTO's Certificate 3, their college pass alone. We did notify QBCC straight away of our concerns, they put an interim policy in place to stop this from happening further, because it is actually, there should be a sign-off by both the employer and the RTO. Their technical qualifications for licensing document, which is their guideline, isn't worded correctly. So we have discussed this at the licensing advisory panel, and the decision has been made to review that document and to permit this from, well, to prevent this from happening again. In the interim, it's not, licenses aren't being issued on a TAFE result or an RTO result alone at the moment, but until we change that document, it won't be official. So that is on the agenda to happen shortly. This year, the Certificate 3 in Plumbing training package has been under review by Artibus for about 2 or 3 years now. It's been a long road, but the new training package was released earlier this year, and it's not great from a selection standpoint. There's not a massive variety of units that can be selected for the plumbing trade. But after reviewing quite extensively with other parts of the industry, being RTOs, the union, and ourselves, of course, 58 units were selected as what will encapsulate the general plumber. The general plumber being the minimum requirement for a license here in Queensland. On from that, we have general plumber. That will be plumbing, drainage, and gas fitting, by the way, general plumber. Then you have general plumbing roofing. So there's additional roofing units included in that. There's also mechanical services, which has mechanical units included. So it was reasonably slim pickings, but what we've come up with out of those 58 units will give us basically the same outcome as we currently have with the 64. The reason there's 58 instead of 64, some units are actually amalgamated now to create one larger common unit instead of 2 or 3 separate units. So that will commence officially from September 2022. It can be delivered now. It is live, but RTOs are now in the process of tooling up and teaching out old classes. But from September 2022, that will be the course that students will be enrolled in. Termination of drain lines with water heaters. We've got some questions here that we get quite commonly asked. You've really only got 3 options for the termination of a drain line from a water heater, and that's either direct to drain, that can be over an ORG or a DT or DG. In most jurisdictions, not all jurisdictions, you can go to stormwater. Some local governments don't like you discharging to stormwater, and the standard does allow for the provision of a rubble pit. And you can see there in item 2, above a gravel pit, most people are putting a piece of 100 mil in the ground full of gravel. It's a good idea to put a bend on that and maybe take it away from the footings of the house, because water discharging anywhere near the footings of the property or the building may cause issues if you have reactive soils. Another thing to keep in mind is the length of your drain line and what's your permissible maximum length. The maximum length with 3 changes of direction is 9 meters for a drain line. Now, of course, the way to circumvent that or go around that is to discharge to a ton dish, because there's no limit to how far your ton dish line can discharge. And that can make it possible if your DT or whatever's too far away. Next one. Your Form 16s and building certifiers. This has been a bugbear for quite a few years, for 10 or 15 years, where principal contractors or builders basically hold the plumber or other trades to ransom to provide a Form 16 for works that have been performed. Now, it's always been a point of contention because the Form 16 comes under the Building Act, and of course, we come under the Plumbing and Drainage Act. There's never been a requirement for a plumber who has performed licensed plumbing or drainage work to provide a Form 16 for any of that work, but it's quite often blackmailed into them. We won't pay you until you provide the Form 16, because the certifier is asking the builder for a Form 16 and the builder is asking the plumber for a Form 16. Unfortunately, some people, just to make the problem go away, provide that Form 16, but that only continues the problem down the track. When the next plumber turns up, well, the last guy gave me a Form 16, you have to give me a Form 16 too. In consultations with the department, they released 2 guidelines late last year. One is specifically for fire and one is specifically for plumbing and drainage work. And in a nutshell, it basically says if the work falls under the Plumbing and Drainage Act, which all regulated work does, or even unregulated work does, but plumbing and drainage work, there's no Form 16. It doesn't, it's not applicable. You're either getting a council inspection if it's permit work, you're issuing a Form 4 if it's notifiable work, or if it's minor work or unregulated work, there's no paperwork. No Form 16s. And notifiable work, even though it's been introduced for quite some time now, we do get a lot of questions or a lot of queries around notifiable work still. So this might be a bit of an ongoing thing. We'll pick the top 5 and throw them out there. There's no limit to the number of fixtures you can add to a Class 1 building. Now, if it's an extension or a renovation, there's no limit. If it's a detached addition, it wouldn't fall under notifiable work. But if you want to add 50 fixtures to a Class 1 building, that's fine. It's notifiable work as long as it's not above 2 stories. Repair versus replace. A lot of people get picked up in their notifiable work audits for work that they should have put a Form 4 in for when they didn't, when in reality, it should have actually been minor work. And what I mean there is if Mr. Smith puts a shovel through his water service and you come out and repair by putting 2 joiners in and a piece of pipe, but on your invoice, you say replace section of pipe, it's notifiable work on paper because you've replaced something. Whereas if you repair a pipe, it's minor work. Now, in the old days, under the old legislation, there were limitations to how much pipe you could repair or replace, and that was 3 meters on a drain or 6 meters on a water service. When the legislation changed, they were omitted, they were left out. So there's no limit to how much drain you can replace under a repair or under notifiable work. There's no limitations on length anymore. If a bobcat hits a drain and you've got to replace 5 meters of it because it's broken, you're repairing a broken or damaged pipe, it would be minor work. But if you altered that pipe work in your repair, it then falls under notifiable work. Likewise, if you were replacing it and altered the pipe, it's notifiable work. And the common triggers on a Class 1, if it's on a combined drain, it's automatically not going to be notifiable work. It's going to be permit work. If you're installing a new treatment plant or if you're replacing the transpiration area, it's going to be permit work. And obviously, if it's a new build, it's permit work. And your 2 to 9 triggers, if it's below ground drainage, it's going to be permit work, not notifiable. And if it's a multi-story building above 2 stories, you're starting to get into permit work as well, depending on what you're actually doing. And with the below ground drainage, I just said for the 2 to 9s, if you're replacing, it's automatically permit work. But if you're repairing a broken or damaged pipe, it's only minor work. Moving along. No, we're not. All done. would we have any questions for Penny, Kim, or myself? Please feel free.
Thanks, Ernie.
How do we ask a question?
Yeah, just go for it. Yep.
Oh, you can hear me now.
Yeah, we can hear you, James.
Okay, for Ernie, just with the drain lines, it doesn't seem to be raising its head too much for me, but I'm now starting to get pest controllers complain about the rubble drain. Now, the way you described it is very similar to how I do it with the pit. Dig your little rubble drain, take the pipe a metre away from the footings. But some of them are saying, well, that's not adequate now. And even the inspectors actually agree with me. When it rains heavy, that little rubble drain you've made fills up with water anyway. So they're worried about termite ingress, which is what I didn't understand or didn't know the reactive soil thing was an issue. But certainly the termite ingress is all that I was worried about. And the pest controllers, I even had one where there was a nice timber deck off the house. I took the drain line 2.5 metres through the deck, left it in a location that you could see it dripping and stuff. So there was nothing around or anything like that. And they've said, no, we still want a garden hose on it. It needs to go into the backyard. I'm going, mate, that's my plumbing rules. Like,
sorry, a garden hose on it.
Yeah. So to put over the end of the drain line, just push a garden hose on the end of the exposed copper drain line.
You can't do that. You can't do that though.
No, I didn't. And you know, I tell the customers, and I tell the customers that, and for whatever reasons, and they're saying, the pest controllers are saying, well, to comply with their works, you just can't have it dripping how our rules are saying it's dripping. So at the end of the day, if a plumbing inspector doesn't crawl up my backside, that's all I worry about. But this is becoming an issue more and more.
I've never actually heard this one before, and I'm not an expert on termites, but yes, they are attracted to moisture.
Yeah.
I'll look into that a little bit further. I've never heard that one before.
Really? I reckon there'd be other plumbers that would have come across it, or people are purchasing a new home and stuff like that, and the pest guys bought it up on the building and pest inspection, and then we come along and say, well, that complies with our rules. I have mentioned to customers, if it's an issue, you can put a hose on it. I can't. I won't do it, but if you want to do it as a homeowner, knock yourself out.
I should add to that, whilst it's allowed, your rubble pit should be your absolute last resort. If you've got another option to a rubble pit, don't put a rubble pit in.
No, and that's correct. A lot of the time now, and as a lot of the rural fellas would know, all the downpipes on the house are hooked up to rainwater tanks. So we can't put a ton dish into a downpipe. It is a last resort, and for me, maybe 1 in 10 jobs are doing a rubble drain at the moment. And you know, bearing in mind I'm doing 400 or 500 solar hotties a year, so that's still a few that's out there. But I don't know. I'm just raising it because I don't know. Yeah. If you don't know, then I don't know how we go forward with it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, mate.
You know, what I do is I take, my understanding was we had to be 1.5 metres away from the building. And what I do is I take maybe a bit of 50 mil PVC. I drill that into the side of the, I always put in a 250 by 250 gully box, which I drill holes into. I then fill around the outside of that with gravel, and then I fill the actual rubble, the actual 250 by 250 plastic box with stone, so that the mosquitoes can't breed in it. And you know, as far as I'm concerned, I've done more than what is required as far as the pest controllers are concerned, because the dripping in any of the water is 1.5 metres away from the house. No different to what the QBCC asks us, not asks us, but asks builders to do by putting in a concrete pathway or whatever around the house and having that fall away from the house, and they ask for 1.5 metres. So I reckon I comply in every respect as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, that's not a bad option either. The other time where I get caught is, like you just mentioned, is what I would call a homestead house with veranda all around it and a concrete veranda all around it, rainwater, downpipes feeding the rainwater tank. And then the only option I have had very occasionally is on that concrete path is to let it go into the join of the concrete, and then it gets out past all of that. So yeah, it's not easy sometimes, but yeah, you always.
But you know, like most of us have got, you know, drain cleaners nowadays, and we can just whack the pressure jetter if we have to underneath the concrete path. You know, put our ton dish there above the concrete path, and then run our overflow from our hotties into that, and then take that 50 mil PVC out to the 250 millimeter stormwater pit. The other way that I've done it.
Yeah, that'd work too. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, James and William. Does anyone have any other questions? Everyone's been quiet tonight. Mick?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I tuned out for a second when I shouldn't have. Can I get clarification on the Form 16s? If new roofs, wall cladding, stormwater, etc., do we require to put in the Form 16s?
So if it doesn't fall under the Plumbing and Drainage Act, well, I suppose it depends what work you're doing, but from our point of view, yes, if you're putting in a stormwater drain, yes, you can put it under a Form 16 because that's technically building work. If you're putting a new roof on, if you're doing some gutter work, if you're putting a rainwater tank on, if it's not plumbing and drainage work, it's unlicensed work, or it doesn't fall under the Plumbing and Drainage Act, yes, it more than likely will fall under a Form 16. But what people are commonly getting asked for a Form 16 for is, excuse me, the drain under the slab or under the ground, the rough-in, the fit-off, and the water efficiency.
Yeah.
None of those you're required to give a Form 16 for.
Yeah. Yeah, Roger.
If you need to be a licensed plumber to do it, you won't be giving them a Form 16.
Penny, can I just say on that I had a situation just recently at Indooroopilly where we had to put in we all do our seal-offs on a Form 1. We don't do them on Form 4s because I always believe in being able to hand over that drain that I've done and sealed off to the next plumber that comes along to do that house. We did a job over at Indooroopilly. In actual fact, we were going to do the seal-off at the back of the property where the drain was, but then the engineer and the builder asked us to take that drain line underneath the retaining wall and into where the building envelope was going to be. So I had to do that as requested. I had I did the seal off. I brought the drain, virtually I extended the drain from where I was going to do the seal off another 2 meters underneath the retaining wall, put in an articulated joint, and then brought that line up to surface level. Now, it was all fully inspected by BCC, but the builder would not give, or the owner would not pay me because the builder demanded a Form 16 off me because exactly like you said earlier in the piece, that the certifier said that he had to have a Form 16. And I listen to what you say all the time, and you're a very knowledgeable young man, but I had to do it, Ernie, otherwise I wouldn't have got paid for the job.
Can you just call me a young man again?
No, sorry, mate. I'm an old bastard like me.
Spectators.
Well, look, I understand that, but 100%, and I've been banging on about this for at least 10 years. There is no requirement to give a Form 16. Your certifier was incorrect. I think the innocent party in all this is probably the builder, because he's only being hounded by the certifier. There is the guideline available. I'm happy to get the link sent out to everyone here tonight, so you can feel free to send the link on to your builder if you ever get hit with the Form 16, because it very clearly states, thankfully, that you don't have to do it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Rob Weaver. Go, Rob. How are you?
Good, thanks. Both of you looking well. Young Ernie.
Young Ernie. We'll give him that nickname now.
Yeah. there seems to be a number of situations where the termination of this drain varies from council to council. In Rocky and Livingston here, we were 2 metres away from the footings. Got to have a 1 metre square rubble pit. So there doesn't seem to be any guidelines. I'm not sure they're making them up themselves, or what is actually required.
Okay, a metre square rubble pit for water heater discharge is pretty wild.
Cubic metre.
Cubic metre, sorry, a cubic metre.
Cubic metre. And depending on whether there's reactive soil, it's got to discharge the volume of the discharge for 10 seconds and not overflow the entry point.
Yeah, okay. So two things for that, Rob. From the standard, the minimum is 100 mil rubble pit. Now, the standard is only the bare minimum. It's the deemed to satisfy. So if local government want a cubic metre rubble pit, they are perfectly entitled to want that, because they can exceed the standard, they can't reduce it. So that's, whilst it's overkill, that's okay. They can do that. The other thing I wanted to say is there's probably nothing quite, in our trade, there's probably nothing quite as useless as a rubble pit, in my opinion. It's a hole in the ground full of rocks. Yeah. Take it to drain if you can.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Anybody
also, could you send out that slide you had on the discharge points one?
Yeah, that's straight out of 3500.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Does anybody else have any questions? Anything else they'd like to raise? No, anything you want to share with us? Anything that's happening on the ground? Rob, you're obviously in Rocky. Yeah. Anything you want to give an update on?
And I'd just like to ask, we're restricted with all the discharge points from our hot water systems. The air conditioning guys don't seem to abide by any rules that we have to abide by, which seems to be damn annoying to me, because they're continually leaking or discharging water. There doesn't seem to be any requirement to take to the drain or anywhere at all. They just discharge on the ground.
100%, and that's probably the catalyst as to why some local governments won't let us discharge to stormwater, because of the condensate constantly running down the gutter.
What does that matter? What does that matter?
Green algae, green slime in the gutter.
Are you serious?
Kid you not.
Where do they get these people from?
Keep on breeding, unfortunately, James.
Yes. Maybe we should get a license for that.
Yes, I agree.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Everyone's been quiet today, Ernie. I think they were asking lots of questions on Friday, weren't they?
You want me to generate a discussion?
Oh no, here we go.
Yeah, go on.
Can sprinkler fitters work on drinking water?
No.
Wow, I thought that'd fire everyone up. Nothing.
They'd need an RPZ, wouldn't they? So as soon as they put the RPZ in, it'd be their ground.
No, so I'm talking about a drinking water service. I'm not talking about a fire service. And yeah. I'd argue some of that they can't work on either. But a drinking water service, can a sprinkler fitter work on it?
No, he's not a licensed plumber.
I put the thread tape the wrong way, I reckon.
Basically, the question comes about, there is a new fire design that's, it's been out for a couple of years now, that came out from FPAA, the Fire Protection Association of Australia. They penned a book and one of these designs, which is the 101D, is for buildings up to 25 metres. It is a domestic sprinkler system that it's a domestic water service that incorporates sprinkler heads. Now, it is not downstream of an RPZ, it is downstream of a non-testable device. There is no isolation on the unit, on the line, and there is a fixture. There is a WC at the end of the sprinkler line. So who could possibly do that work legally?
Licensed plumber.
Licensed plumber with a domestic and residential endorsement would be the only person who could currently do that work.
But Ernie, we used to run courses for residential, domestic and residential fire in the old days, but we never had a big take up by our members to do the work. And not that there was a lot of work out there, but you know, when you've got all these lunatic bloody councils now creating bushfire zones at the backs of people's houses, I think maybe it's time that we resurrected the bloody, you know, the domestic and residential sprinkler system for our plumbers to do as an add-on.
Yeah, look, the courses are there. It's available through TAFE Queensland at the moment. Currently, there's for the domestic and residential, there's four units that we would have to do to get that endorsement. It's just very few, as Bill just said, there's very few people out there who hold the endorsement for domestic and residential. But unfortunately, currently, sprinkler fitters are doing the work. The reason I'm bringing that up is because nowhere in the sprinkler fitter apprenticeship do they learn how to handle drinking water. So they're not qualified. It's that simple.
They don't even know how to run underground pipe work either, Ernie.
Well, that's not covered in their apprenticeship either. Anything else, guys?
Anyone got any other questions? No. All right. Well, we'll close the meeting early. Thank you to everyone for making the time to join tonight. We hope that you found value. If there's certain topics that you would like us to present on, you can just let us know, and we can discuss those as part of the agenda. So just submit them in, send us an email, and we can raise for the next meeting. We are doing these every 2 months. So one we do on a Friday at lunchtime, and the second one we do on a Monday evening for those people that are working during the day that can't join at that time. So we've just tried to do 2 different times to make the majority people be able to attend. So yeah.
And it's appreciated too. You guys are working overtime. We're in at leisure time.
Thanks, Rob. All right. Well, we'll close the meeting, everyone. Thank you. And please stay safe. And if you need anything in the interim, please give us a call or send us an email, and we're only too happy to help.
Good night, young Ernie. Good night, Penny.
Good night, everyone. Thank
Thank you.
you. Bye.